G'day, it's Brian. It is the Art of Startup War. We are back. Again, I'm interviewing a phenomenal company that we have made a direct investment into, and we are so flippin' happy we have done. Because if you love Zoom, more importantly, if you love their valuation, if you love the way the virtual world is going and how COVID has really forced everybody to want to build deeper and more meaningful relationships because we haven't had any in the last year and a half. If you love the fact that social media is so horribly inadequate for building any of those deep and meaningful relationships, then you will absolutely love what Varty are building, because they are taking everything to the next level. Literally, it's not even I heard their pitch. I didn't hear their pitch. I went on their platform for maybe a minute and a half, and the decision to invest was made straight away. I see everybody wanting to use Varty. It is such a flippin' no-brainer. So I want to bring in Wes and bring in Adam, and they're going to talk a little bit about what the heck Varty is. And then we're going to go deep into the why. But first of all, maybe just a quick minute or two overview of what Varty comprises of.
Sure. So Varty is the virtual party, and the way you interact, you can kind of see on the top right of my screen here. You basically enter a space where you have some connection to people, whether you were like invited for maybe a church event or a networking event, or maybe it's your university space, basically something in common with people where you'd want to meet other people in that space. And then you take a photo, that's your avatar, and you walk around with your arrow keys, and then you smash in to enter small private video calls. So the goal here is to really be like the first authentic form of social networking, where it's not really about content or posting, but more about making new targeted connections. For me, like that means like meeting other entrepreneurs in New York City. For Wes, he had his own reasons. He wanted to meet other weightlifters. And like there are so many communities that we want to belong to, and the internet can be really powerful when used the right way. And we just felt that social media wasn't really taking advantage in the most meaningful way of bringing you the connections that you should have in your life. We see this currently being used by like universities, a couple online churches, and just other random sort of networking events, like a fundraising event. All of our sales, for the record, have been inbound. If people attend an event and they go to like host their own. But we see it being used in the future. Like you just hop on at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday because like maybe you want to meet a romantic partner, your future roommate when you just moved to a new city, or future co-founder or friend.
So I think what's really interesting is some of the words that you're using, even as you're describing it. Like you use words like belong and meaningful. And it's because the current forms of social media, if they were going to use words, they would be using words like follow and watch. And it's so different. And it's actually, it gets a little bit depressing when we think about the road people have gone down in social media currently, whereby the only thing you really do is you just want to live lives through other people, which is so sad because we have awesome lives to live. We have incredible things to talk about. And if we can just get back into replicating what we used to do in the real world, which is to meet people, to befriend people, to get to know people, to understand people, to like become proper companions, it's so much friggin' better. So I love it. And it's hard for people to, especially folks who are listening to this in a podcast, and they're thinking, well, I don't know, man, how do you actually make that work? So imagine a world that literally you click into online and it's exactly the same as the world that you're in right now. So you can make a replica of your church. You can make a replica of your local park. You can make a replica of anything that's there at all. And then built within that replica, you can then walk around and meet people. So for example, we did one in the dojo. And of course, we're an accelerator for startups. So we have a bar at one area and we have like a play area in the other area. And there's another area for meeting rooms and another area where you watch movies and things. So Varty created all these awesome virtual areas. So I'd say to Sophie, hey, I'll meet you down at the bar. And then somebody else would say, hey, Brian, I'm up at the other end. So I'd then walk up the other end. And you enter into these groups and you start having conversations. I was going to add a word in there, which is serendipitous conversations. But sometimes they're serendipitous and sometimes they're pre-planned, but they always feel real. And that's what's really nice about this. And obviously, Zoom never captured this, nor did they want to. Zoom wants to be a functional place you came onto for meetings, and they do great for this. This is entirely different. This brings the real world to your laptop so you can engage with people in a way which is fun and cool and awesome. And even if it's a Friday night and you're at home and you just want to hang and meet with some cool people without necessarily going out, now you have the ability to do this. So we're going to talk, I want to go deeper into like mental health and a bunch of the other areas that actually make this massively important. But before I do, let's focus on the first area, because everybody listening to this podcast is an investor. And everybody who's listening is thinking, okay, I want to invest in a company. I want to find something where I'm going to get a good return. I would like to get the monster returns that are given to folks who make good investments, whether it's 20 times or 30 times or 100 times. But at the same time, I want the certainty of knowing as much as possible that that investment is going to not fail, that it's going to make it. And a lot of that starts with the team itself. So I'd like to talk, and let's kick in with Wes. And I'd love to talk about your experience, Wes, and what you bring to this. And then let's jump in with you, Adam, as well. And then tell us all about the extended team that are going to make Varty a massive success.
Yeah, absolutely. We're quite a lean team right now. The core group is myself, Adam, and one of our colleagues who's a senior engineer out for a video streaming company in Luxembourg. And all three of us are technical, but also very focused on the design process and building a bigger vision beyond just another enterprise software company. So myself, I studied computer science at Columbia and went on to become a high frequency trader. And I think Adam and I, early in our careers, both around 1 to 2 years in, realized that we had dreams to start a company and solve major problems in the world. And our work in the financial services industry was kind of our own personal way of procrastinating. We're telling ourselves, oh, by networking in finance and accumulating capital in finance, we'll become better founders 10 years later. But in reality, we have these ideas, we have these visions, and it's just a matter of flipping the switch and saying, hey, I'm going to pursue building this dream right now. That I'm going to do it 10 years later when I feel ready.
Okay, perfect. It makes total sense. So kick-ass background, strong degree, great technical knowledge, which is required to build a platform like this. What about yourself, Adam?
So CS major at Berkeley in California, from New York.
Tiny, obscure school. Yep.
Yeah. Not only as obscure as Columbia. But then I worked at Uber for a summer doing like machine learning stuff. And then worked at Boston Consulting Group doing consulting, trying to learn the business side to eventually start my tech company. And then just couldn't resist, had to go all in on this thing. And then I think we should speak to Ivan a bit more. He has 15 plus years doing software engineering, 7 years pretty much with our exact tech stack and doing other social video things. So he actually was a user of Varty back in like November 2020. And he, kept prying at us, like telling us features and ideas, like, oh, we could do this, get this game, or, we can make it even more fun if you basically like gamify certain things. And like, eventually we just started listening to him and we're like, all right, we got to bring this guy in. He's like insanely experienced and is exactly on the same wavelength of trying to not just build a virtual events platform, but all three of us really, are emotionally tied to that bigger vision of like, wait, the world's becoming a little more distant, and like the internet is a really good tool, and it doesn't have to be that way. There don't need to be these trade-offs, like in terms of like, people being addicted to their phones, scrolling and not feeling like they've made a real connection. Like we could actually connect people online.
And let's speak to that bigger vision a little bit more. So where does this go to?
So I always like to say that the best software runs not only on silicon chips, but also on our own flesh and minds. Basically, what social media did was it introduced a paradigm oriented primarily around two concepts. One is the profile, and the other is the content newsfeed. And you can see how these paradigms actually change the way we socialize in our everyday lives. When we make small talk, we're very efficient about how we understand another person just in the first 30 seconds of the interaction. We ask questions like, where do you work? Where do you live? Where did you go to school? And it's just almost like we mentally have an image of their Facebook profile and we're filling it out for ourselves when we're talking to them in person. Instead of letting our social media shape the way that we socialize, our vision is, let's take the way we socialize, because we know that works. It's been working for hundreds, thousands of years. And instead, let's build social media that really serves the way we socialize rather than the other way around.
I like that. Yeah. So just why go to a place where other people's lives are more important than ours? Go to a place where we can make our lives more important. I absolutely love that. Adam, do you have anything to add on top of that?
Yeah, I've never heard Wes say it. I like that a lot. We should, yeah, that's a really good way to frame it. That's definitely a guiding principle, is like what is working in real life, like not making people addicted, but like I enjoy socializing in real life in certain ways, not in every way. So it's not an exact replica of real life. Certain things don't need to exist. Like I think the main thing we eliminate is like locational barriers, obviously, because it's, you know, online. So I think a good way to think of it is like, we're not going to go on like a virtual airplane and wait 5 hours to travel from New York to California, but I could aggregate all the people that I would want to meet in a space, and then I wouldn't get to meet in real life because they live all over the world, or like they're busy. And then I can just walk up and meet them in the same level or close to the same level of intimacy as I would in real life, you know, face to face. I can't like touch them or anything or shake their hand, but it's about as meaningful, and it's enough to develop, you know, a true friend. We don't think DMing on Instagram or you know, like what other like liking or posting is really developing someone you're going to want to like really gain a lot of value from, whether it's in a business context or like a romantic relationship context. We think that it requires starting with intimacy to end at an intimate relationship. So
Yeah, you don't say. I mean, just there's no intimacy on social media whatsoever. If anything, social media is an excuse to be able to make things as brief as you can possibly make it and then move on to the next thing so that you can continue to consume more and more and more and more content. Man, I love this idea. Look, I'm an Irish guy, left Ireland 30 plus years ago. And like a lot of my buddies are still there. So and I would never, I'm not going to go on Facebook and like text him or DM him or like, I'm not going to do any of that BS. Like, that's not me. But what I would do is, man, I would love to go and have like a little replica of our local town, our local place with a local bar there, and go in there and meet with my buddies and say, hey, listen, you know, we'll meet on a Tuesday afternoon and we'll just talk about some stuff. Or if I love playing an instrument, like to go in there and just to play with an instrument with a couple of other folks. Or if I'm Wes and like Wes is saying, hey, you know what, there's a bunch of weightlifters that I want to talk about because I really want to talk about like what I just tried to do and how that worked and how that compared against before. Because now you're engaging on about stuff. You're engaging, number one, with people that you love, or stroke and you're engaging about things that you love. I mean, Wes, do you see this as being as going, because what's going to happen with the platform is you started with control, right? And you say, we want to go after these demographics and this is where it's going to be. And I know Wes is thinking it's going to go sports, right? There's going to be sports people everywhere. And I'm there's a part of me, man, I was watching Djokovic yesterday against Medvedev and like watching the tennis. And I'm like, there's a part of me that's thinking, oh, I would love to have this awesome, cool community of tennis folks that would like jump in there and we could have conversations and like who likes who more and who thinks Nadal will come back and who thinks Djokovic will win their stuff. But there's so many other communities as well. What do you think is going to happen, Wes?
That's a great point. It's definitely good to keep an open mind to different verticals that we could pursue here and not pigeonhole ourselves too early. Especially given that when you iterate the product for different consumers, you're going to irreversibly make the product worse for other consumers, maybe who you weren't even aware could become your users. So it's really important to be deliberate and analytical about how we proceed. So with whether it's using our Facebook ads to test user interest or just getting on the phone and talking to customers, we've really been experimenting with quite a few different sectors. But I think if you were to ask me what are the best entry points for Varty, I think that our current strategy of becoming a virtual church services platform is really one of the most promising. So first, because they have a high frequency of recurring events. Second, because independent of COVID, churches have already been a community that's becoming increasingly online. There's a few reasons for this. And lastly, because churches overlap with a whole host of different communities. So when you get churches, you also get Christian education. You enter into a Christian dating community. There's parenting and recreation communities and so forth, all closely tied to the church. And that's why we really think that's such a promising sector for us to explore a fit with.
And it's funny because churches would never have, if I had to do a list that I was inventing, like churches would not have been in the top 10 on the list. But when you think about it, they tick all of the boxes for a perfect online engagement. It's not like they're going to change gods in the following week, right? They're going to stick with their people, stick with God. They're going to stick with their environment. They're going to stick with the community. And they want a place that they can continually engage outside just going maybe to the church once a week or once every couple of weeks. So it's a brilliant place to start. Absolutely fantastic. And then Adam, on top of the team where you are right now, so you've started this off, you've brought it from nothing to something. I think many of us look at it and look at what you built now, what you both built now, and we say, yeah, we can see this going forward. But I can't believe that was always the way. Was there talk to us a little bit about the difficulties at the start, and then about what was the moment that you were like, dude, I think we have something huge.
COVID was just starting, and just moved to New York, and was like, oh wow, can't wait to go all these bars, and they weren't open. So the idea at first was like a virtual bar. When I'm bored and don't really know a lot of people, how do I meet new people? No one else really wanted to have a beer in front of their computer screen, it seemed, or at least not in massive numbers. But we realized this, weirdly enough, we didn't really market it. We just sort of started building this, and then people we knew would hop on and then show their friends, and universities would start using it, and Singularity University reached out to us. We didn't even market anything or do any outbound outreach, and then all of a sudden they were using it. So that's sort of when we got all this feedback of oh, there are actually other use cases for just moving around in video chat. That's when what was the real problem I was trying to solve for myself? It was I want to meet people that I may not be able to in real life, and in a way that's just as authentic as real life. So very simply, that bigger vision it felt like it hadn't been really achieved. As a social person, I don't really enjoy social media. Why is that? It shouldn't be the case. And technology does not have to have these trade-offs. It does not have to make you feel insecure. It does not have to make you waste hours and hours of time achieving not very much. Feels very dystopian, I think, to me and Wes, when we look at some of the stuff with social media. But yeah, that bigger vision compelled a lot of people. We realized I wasn't alone in what's going on in the world. How do we solve this problem? Social media really is amazing at certain things, but not so good at other things. And it should be.
So it almost seems, Wes, that you got to a stage almost kind of immediately where you hit product fit and realized that this was going to take off, which, by the way, is highly unusual. Normally, that first 6 or 12 months are spent in free fall panic. The first 2 or 3 months are about you buy a t-shirt, get some business cards, you feel I'm a CEO, it was great, we'll run the company, we run the world. And then immediately afterwards, oh my God, nobody's going to like us, they're not going to want us. But it seems like you got to the stage immediately where both you knew that this was going to be huge and it was going to take off, and folks around you were in the same place.
Right. Yeah. And I think Adam and I both had this sense of urgency too. So beyond solving an immediate practical need, where the world is still at least 50% virtual, with COVID restrictions pretty severe across the United States and also the world, at least in some places still. I think we also realized that some of the urgency of our vision is moving pretty quickly, at least. Maybe to give an example, in the US at least, we're all quite familiar with how social media pretty much derailed any legitimate public political conversation from 2016 through 2020. And this is because of the culture created by online political communities. Not to blame any individual or group, but actually the way that all these groups come together and communicate is more so the problem. Imagine trying to call someone else an extremist face to face. Imagine trying to draw lines as extreme as the ones that we've drawn with someone face to face. If we can bring back these more human models of socializing to this internet age, then we think that moving forward, we can do a bit of good. And then the question just became, how do we get there as fast as possible? There's no time kind of patting ourselves on the back for a nice product, when really we need to be thinking about our go-to-market strategy every day, 24/7, pivoting if necessary, making as many adjustments as possible to fit in where we think we belong.
Amazing. And how is that go-to-market strategy been working, Adam? So you've come in, you've immediately got users, you've built this yourself. Like folks like Clubhouse had raised like $5-10 million before they got to any real usability within their product. You started it, you've got it out of the gate. You've obviously got great development shops in-house, which allowed you to do a bit of that. But talk us forward, talk us what you've built so far from a number perspective, and then just talk that traction forward about where you believe it's going to go to.
Yeah, sure. So I certainly wouldn't say we're at like product market fit. It was certainly exciting that we had people using it, and like there was certainly a fit for certain people. But like, you know, we like the growth was certainly very nice. And like, you know, when we first launched, like December of 2020, and then like through, you know, April, and we were then, you know, really iterating on just who was using it. So Singularity hit us up, and then they use it, and then attendees came, and then a couple other universities started using it, and then other universities, and then like, you know, there's a free version where you can have an event for under 25 people in a space. So we had about like 7 or 8 people, you know, pay to host really big events, like upwards of 25 to like maybe like 100. But then that growth sort of slowed, just being honest, in like June. And then we were like, what is going on? And we noticed something really interesting. And this was like our big insight, was like the Christian universities, it did not slow it. Like we actually saw a bunch of new accounts from like Eastern Mennonite University or Harding University. And we're just like, what's going on here? So we started talking to people at those schools, and, you know, we learned that like there's a, like beyond just the Christian universities, churches. And it's like there's a massive need with churches, because they're actually struggling to recruit youth. So that's like one big problem that, you know, we hope to solve, is like they need to go more virtual, and they need to keep them engaged. So like the fact that people stay on Varty longer because they can, like, you know, if they're bored of someone, just walk away and talk to someone else. That very simple way of interacting is a lot of leverage for a church to recruit younger people.
Another piece of feedback we've heard from churches is that when they're trying to reach new audiences, there's a lot of fear sometimes, where people might feel they don't fit in at a new church, or if they aren't Christian already, they worry about whether or not they'll be accepted in a church community. And of course, we know that these anxieties are pretty much baseless. But how do we show those people that they don't need to be anxious about joining a new community? Churches are really excited about online engagement because it's a really low barrier way for people to get involved in the community. It might be a lot to put on your Sunday best and drive over to a church and actually have to commit yourself to being in a building for an hour and a half or 2 hours. But if it's as easy as clicking on a link while you're still in your sweatpants at home, maybe you're going to reach and convert a whole new audience that you didn't think you had access to before. And that is also part of why this opportunity is so big with online churches.
So it's both of that. It's getting new users, I guess you could say, but really like members of your congregation. It's more meaningful than just that term. But secondly, like developing your congregation, like enabling them to interact even more is the other piece.
It's engagement. Like it's real, true engagement. It's building relationships with people. It's really funny. Sometimes the things that are the most traditional, the most valued, the stuff that like 50 years ago, people would say, I don't understand. There's a new technology to like build deeper relationships with people, it's like, yeah, I'm sorry. Like in the last 50 years, we lost it. Back in your day, it was there, but it was there for small groups of people around you. The price we paid for globalism was losing those relationships, which are the things that were the most meaningful to us. This is why your platform is so huge. There are so many multi levels that folks can come in on them. It's off the charts. So talk to us forward. How do we go forward? How much money are we going to raise? And then what's that going to do to the users? How are we going to build this? Are we going to see with enough money being raised, are we going to see the type of user growth that we would see in Clubhouse? Are we going to areas themselves? What's the plan for taking this to be $1 billion company?
Sure. So we're raising 1 million on a safe, and that money's being used, about 50% of it is being used to hire a few engineers. So these are 2 iOS engineers, an infrastructure engineer. And to be honest, we have most of the tech talent we need already on the team. So that's why relatively that's like not an insanely high number. The rest is going to growth. And what that exactly means is hiring a couple, basically like growth leads to cultivate partnerships, whether it's with churches, but more importantly, like you mentioned, like the Clubhouse, like horizontal, crazy kind of growth, is, like as we're experimenting with churches, like we're also still interested in other, like, pockets of users. And we think like influencer events is another really interesting, more consumer focused thing to focus on. So hosting like weekly influencer events, for meet and greets that are, more intimate, where you actually are connecting with, the person you're a huge fan of. And this is not, there's a lot of crossover here with the church influencers as well. So we don't think this is like so out of left field. But we hope to basically get to like 1 million users, and 100 paid institutional partnerships. We think doing both approaches, it's not so much as of a hedge, but it actually like they synergize each other. You get like churches regularly using it. It's like a community that's already on there. And then they can kind of explore like, oh, what's going on in this other event up here? Like kind of on Clubhouse, you go to like see someone speak and then you see something else going on up there. Except instead of just passively listening and like maybe raising your hand and talking in front of like 100 people, just walk up to people. There's no anxiety when you're talking in like a group of like 3, or at least it's a lot less.
Oh, it's a lot less because you walk into a room, there's 3 people in there, let's say, you walk in and immediately you walk in, the need for the other people is to acknowledge that you're there, right? Because
That's
you're
true.
there. And if anybody's gone to networking events, which I'm sure everybody has, they're horrible, right? They're disgusting because you always feel like you're half a foot away from being in the most interesting conversation. And because it's the most interesting conversation, they don't want to stop the conversation to allow you to come that extra half a foot in. So you end up standing there feeling like you're Billy No Friends. While within your environment, it really encourages you to come in. And as soon as you come in, boom, you're in with those 3 people. And as soon as you're in with those 3 people, they have to acknowledge you because you're now part of that group. That fear of walking that last foot, I actually think you guys should be called, mind you, Varty's an awesome name, but you could also be called that last foot because walking that last foot is the most fearful thing. And you make it very easy because you just put them straight in there. And if for any reason that conversation's not working, there's no problem. Like you jump out because there's loads more other conversations which are going. So I think it's very brilliant how you've put yourself. Clubhouse doesn't do anything for engagement. It doesn't do anything for building relationships. It doesn't do anything for building anything meaningful whatsoever. It's just another place to listen to a radio show, right? That's where it's gone to. Social media is, in some levels, the worst evil that's ever come out because now we're so terrified to actually engage with people in a meaningful way. We've almost forgotten how to do it. And I would say the time for Varty is like so important for the human race. And I don't want to go like ridiculously deep in this, but I think
That's
it's
how we
important.
feel. So
Yeah, I think it's important for mental health issues that are out there right now. I think it's important for people who've got self-esteem issues, who spend all of their time, like young girls looking at just BS photos online that looks like the perfect woman when half it's bloody photoshopped and never existed in the first place. Or they're reading about other people's perfect lives all the time, which are not really perfect lives because nobody's going to share like the awful stuff that's happening to them. But the people looking at it are having it happening to them, or you're vicariously just watching content and content and content and content while Vardy brings you to a place where you can actually get to self-love, self-realization, building friendships, building relationships, doing all of the things that we know makes us stronger mentally.
Brian, I really love the comparison you make between Clubhouse and a radio show. Obviously, there's a lot of lessons to be learned for us from how Clubhouse grew as a social media platform. But in reality, I prefer to call it as it is. Social media themselves, they call their products news feeds or content feeds. And we should recognize that these aren't real alternatives to social networking. Really, they're alternatives to getting a newspaper or listening to a radio show. It's doing us a service, certainly. That's why we continue to use it. But if we misrecognize it as something that it isn't, which is to say real socialization, then we're doing ourselves a huge disservice and kind of creating a generation with antisocial tendencies.
Yeah, I agree. Listen, obviously I love it because I invested in it. And for investors out there, okay, here's the 5 criteria that I haven't done this in a while. The 5 criteria that we choose when we're looking to invest in a company. Number 1, we look at how strong are the founders from an execution perspective. That doesn't matter if it's startup, if it's not startup, just life. Like success leaves clues, and so does lack thereof, right? So we look at the founders and say, like, how great of these people and what they've built, what they've done, how they've brought it out, how committed have they been to the product so far. So these guys here, 8 out of 10, right? And I only say 8 out of 10 because it's the first big company, right? Otherwise it would be a 10 out of 10, right? So as far as everything that they could have possibly done so far, they've nailed it, right? Second one that we look at is, do I see a straight line of growth either to 100,000 users or $100,000 a month in revenue? We know that MRR, the monthly recurring revenue, are the active users of 100,000 is a kind of a magic number. Once you get to that place, it's not that you can't fail, but you are at least in a really strong place to build a business from. The chances of failing are much lower. And that's why we want straight line. We've looked at what's happening within the churches here. We've looked at what's happening on the platforms. We've looked at the re-engagement for people coming back on the platforms. And these are with small tests at the beginning. And they are all higher than other social media platforms. So again, very, very strong score on this because they've already begun it. This is just math. This is not guessing. The next one that we'll have a look at is what are the probabilities of this company being able to do $10 million a month in revenue? That's a unicorn, right? Just real simple. It could be less. It might be 5 million or it might be 5 million users or 10 million users, but it has to be at that level. This is the world. Like, we've seen what's happened with Clubhouse, which is like a radio show. We've seen what's happened with Zoom, which is just phenomenal B2B video conferencing. We know that Zoom are 50 million today, 40, 30, they're a billion. I mean, they're at a huge number, right? We also know there's a high potential for them to be a $100 billion company if they take themselves to even mediocre levels. So can Varty get to be a $1 billion company providing more meaningful engagement on the platform? Like, yes. So again, huge tick in the box. Then we look at the skill gapping of the team. This is number 4, right? And we say, does the team have the chops to be able to deal with what's required to at least be able to take it to that $100,000 in revenue? Because after that, we can hire more people. Yes, we have development through the wazoo. We have really strong marketing, which is built into the development as well. We have great product fit experience, which is built in here too. So again, another great score. And then the final thing is, like, how good are they at raising money and being able to get people through? The great thing about this platform is literally the best pitchers are the people who don't have to pitch. I was just brought on the platform, and within a minute and a half, I made the decision that we were going to invest. Literally, my mindset was, I need to be proven why I shouldn't invest after seeing this platform. I believe that the more investors that get engaged with this, it's going to be like watching birds on the Santa Monica Broadwalk. Like, they're just going to get on the bird scooter. There's going to be the 60-year-old investor. They're going to think, oh man, I feel cool again. While really, they brought them back to a place that they loved, that's been long forgotten. It's going to be the same with Varty. People are going to want to engage in a more efficient way in the future, but with the same level of meaningfulness that they had in the past. Varty is the only platform that I have seen that's been able to do this. So I want to finish us on a note whereby adding on to what I've just said there as to why I believe this is such a strong platform as a candidate of being in the $1 billion club. Plus, I want you just to talk to the investors here at the end and speak to them about what you intend to do to make sure that this company absolutely gets there. I'll start with Adam, and then let's give Wes the last word on it so he can add on to what you have to say. And then also, please give your contact details as well so they can contact you.
Sure. So I'll be very tactical about this because I think we've addressed kind of what the big vision is here enough. We're going to, really wedge ourselves, we think, into like churches for now. Maybe it's another use case, but churches is seeming like a very promising lead right now. And to be clear on the numbers here, it's $8 billion a year in virtual donations alone. $1.2 trillion of revenue a year for churches every year. And the growth is insane. I don't remember the exact number in terms of virtual donations growth, but it was something close to like 50%, like year over year, for the past like few years. And that's sort of like where we start. And then what we've already noticed is like, maybe one like event holder is hosting something, and then all these other, kinds of use cases pop up very organically. So by owning one vertical, it opens the door for us to be like, like enter other communities very naturally, whether it's dating, whether it's, communities of people that are sports fans or universities. So that's how we'll get to, in a very tactical, small way to, one vertical and then kind of expanding to similar use cases. But churches seems, again, we think perfect because it really is the basis of communities for like a lot of America. Like that's their entire social life. That's where they meet their husbands and wives. That's where they meet their friends. And yeah, that's where they form their soccer teams.
I love it. And also it's a blue ocean, Adam. So it's such a great market to go into. And Wes, if you could focus more on the team and the execution of the team and like what you guys have to be able to take this all the way, and that would be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So Adam and I have both mentioned Ivan, our third co-founder, a little bit in this call. But it's really a shame that he's in a different time zone right now, hopefully sleeping. I hope at least. But Ivan, we're so excited to add him to the team just because of the sheer enthusiasm coupled with his decade plus of experience working on really similar companies to our own. So what something that really got my attention was he mentioned that he was around Omegle first were around. And for anyone listening who's not familiar with Chat Roulette or Omegle, they're basically early 2000s websites where you can go on and get randomly matched to anyone else around the world who's also using the platform. And the thesis of these websites was that these random one-to-one connections could help create a more connected world where people are more likely to engage with different types of people and end up being more tolerant and open-minded and accepting. But the platform kind of devolved. It ended up just becoming a lot of spam bots, advertising bots, people who didn't really go on with the best of intentions. Maybe they just wanted to make a funny online video or maybe even bully a stranger. And Ivan, actually, when he saw this, he decided, I'm going to build my own chat roulette engine. So a way to match people randomly with each other on the internet. And I'm going to conduct experiments to see how I can solve the problems created by these companies. So can I add mini games that'll make people talk to each other for a longer time? Can I filter by interests more effectively to get people in front of like-minded people rather than someone who they might be nasty to? And when he told me this, I kind of knew, okay, this is exactly the kind of person with the technical ability to execute on his vision, but also that constant ideation. There's never a moment where he stops thinking of new ideas, new theses worth testing, new sectors worth exploring. And that really is just, he's such a pleasure to work with as an early stage engineer. That's not to say that every engineer needs to be a designer and a business strategist. If you're an engineer and you just engineer well, that's totally fine. But for the role that Ivan's stepping into and helping to turn Varty into this next generation billion-dollar social media company, he is the perfect guy. And Adam and I are only becoming more and more technically proficient, and we have that same level of dedication to the ultimate vision, which is why we left our previous careers to pursue this so early in our lives.
I love it. It's absolutely beautiful. Okay, so we have an unbelievable market. We have incredible timing. We have a unique situation now that we've never had before, may never have in the future, to be able to drive people to a platform like this. We have a team that have got great experience. We have a development team that are building this damn thing, bring in money or don't bring in money. And we have a target market, which bizarrely in this entire space is the only blue ocean that there is. And it's absolutely perfect to go after. You guys are awesome. Obviously, anybody can contact me for any details to get through to you, which is brian@expertdojo.com. Adam, do you want to give out the 2 email addresses so everybody's got that?
Right. So it's adam@varty.io. That's for, the virtual party, right? VARTY.io. And Wesley's is Wesley, WESLEY @varty.io.